to Olympian Water Testing, giving you the best in water analysis. Today we're looking at Dartmouth toxic metals, and we're looking at the facts on chromium. So if you want to understand what chromium does in the water, you need to know the facts about it. So chromium is a transition metal, and it is of intermediate atomic weight. You can see the chemistry symbol for it here, Cr, and that is, it's not considered either a heavy metal or a light metal. It's found primarily in three chemical states depending on its electrical charge. Common forms are chromium 0, which has no charge, chromium 3, which has an ionic charge of +3, and chromium 6, which has a charge of +6. And chrome metal, in the form of chromium 0, is the element that makes steel stainless, and chromium is formed in this hard, stable, resistant to chemical changes such as oxidation or rust. Steel alloyed with chromium is harder and less brittle than iron and highly resistant. And this form of chromium is also used to coat or chrome plate the surface of other metals to produce a hard, shiny, chemically resistant surface. The primary form of chromium found in the environment is chromium 3, which is also quite stable as well. And this common form of chromium is always found in a complex with other chemical partners such as oxygen, chlorine, and these compounds it's very inert to substitute. That is, it's resistant to changing forms or exchanging its chemical partners. And actually some small quantities of chromium 6 are found in nature, but most of the chromium in this form is man-made. It's mostly from heavy industry. And chromium 6 is easily and rapidly reduced to chromium 3 by many chemicals and conditions, so it's not very stable in the environment. And like chromium 3, chromium 6 is usually found in chemical complexes with other elements, for example, bound with several oxygen atoms to form chromate, and it's very difficult to oxidize chromium 3 to chromium 6, though it can be done with strong oxidizing agents and very high temperatures. An industrial process called roasting is used to oxidize chromium 3 derived from ores into chromium 6, a form that is widely used in a variety of commercial products. And chromium is actually widely dispersed in the environment. In the Earth's crust, chromium is present in an average of 140 parts per million, but it's not distributed evenly. And high concentrations of chromium can be found in certain ores which are mined commercially, and there's also trace amounts of chromium in rocks, soil, freshwater, ocean water, in the food we eat, the air we breathe. The levels of chromium in the air are generally higher in urban areas and places where chromium waste or slag from production facilities are used as a landfill. Now you might be asking, do we need chromium for health? And humans do need chromium in the form of chromium 3 for proper health. However, most people get their daily chromium from just a well-balanced diet. And that's why that can be an issue, especially if it turns into chromium 6. Because you might be asking, is it harmful to humans as well? The most common form of health effect from exposure to chromium is contract dermatitis, skin inflammation or rash. And a small fraction of the population, between 5 and 10%, has an allergic skin reaction to chromium. Much like other allergies to food, bee stings, cotton, wool, this allergic response is genetically based, and when genetically predisposed, individuals are exposed to chromium compounds in their skin can become reddened and swollen. Avoiding skin contact with chromium in jewelry, for example, is not a problem for most of the general population. That being said, you may develop chronic allergic reactions that necessitate modifying jobs, or in past workers with chrome ore industry who were contact sensitive could develop related asthma conditions in the lungs and respiratory tract if suddenly breathed in large amounts of chromium containing dusts. So then how does chromium affect the environment? Well, industrial hygiene practices have largely reduced or eliminated health risks from exposure to chromium 6 dust. There is a growing concern about environmental exposures. For example, there are sites in the U.S. where large amounts of chromium-containing waste are dumped or used as landfill, such in areas of New Jersey in the United States. And this has led over to concern whether these residents were at risk of disease from inhaling it. However, studies comparing the health of residents in these sites to other populations found no significant differences. That being said, is it still a problem? Concerns have also been raised about possible health effects of chromium-contaminated drinking water. However, there is no evidence to date of a link between chromium exposure from drinking water and any human health effects. However, if there's high levels of anything in your water, any mineral, and you already have that mineral in your system, then that can be a significant issue. And as we can see right here, that even under higher occupational exposures of the past, while there's not evidence for cancers and other respiratory issues, there still can be. In fact, on a gram-for-gram basis, chromium is not considered particularly toxic compared to other metals even by ingestion. Chromium-3 has about the same relative toxicity as table salt in animals, but chromium-6 is about 20 times more toxic, but still hundreds of times less toxic than other heavy metals such as cadmium or mercury. That being said, just because it's not as toxic as something else like lead or mercury or cadmium or arsenic doesn't mean that it's necessarily not a concern, especially if it's in your drinking water. So those are some interesting facts to definitely know about chromium. Now, what you need to take away is that chromium-6 is a lot more dangerous than chromium-3, and it can still have an effect on your health, especially once it gets into water or if you inhale it. That's why it's always a good idea to periodically test your water for chromium.